Good afternoon, everyone. I was amusing myself by laughing at the intro music for some reason. I don't know why. Anyway, it is Wednesday, April 26th at 3 o'clock p.m. That means it is time for Women in Business. Our topic today, because I was thinking about this earlier in the week, and I was thinking, what are the qualities that women really need to have? And one of them I really do think is persistence. I mean, look at how long it took to get the vote. Look at how long we fought to secure our reproductive rights. And then we thought we'd secured them forever. And it turned out that was not so. And so now we're having to persist and fight again to accomplish the goal that we thought we'd already accomplished. And you can name any number of battles that women have fought to secure rights, to secure jobs, to secure opportunities, that they had to be persistent in fighting. If they weren't persistent, then they didn't get anywhere. And the other reason that I've been thinking about persistence a lot is because I am building a trade show floor right now for, I'll show you my applique getaway. And if there is anything that requires persistence, it is putting together a big event, because you have to find all the different pieces and put them together. And you have to deal with a lot of, no, that date doesn't work. No, we can't do it because of this. No, whatever. And the people who aren't sure need to be convinced and all this. And you have to be persistent. If you just contact them and they don't get back to you, then you never get anywhere. If you just contact them and they say, well, we're not sure, and you let it go, you never get anywhere. You have to follow up. You have to be persistent. And so I started thinking about this quality of persistence and what it means and why it's important and what it brings to your life when you have it. And really, honestly, a little bit of, why do I have it? What is it about my makeup that has kept me persisting through the things, some of the things that I've gone through rather, that were a little unpleasant and could have potentially derailed my life in some instances. So why did I persist? What was it? And what do people who have persistence have? And what does that bring to their lives? And why does it matter? And why is it important? So I thought, as I often do, let's do a show about it. Let's talk about it a little and see what this all means, why we care, if we do, and what's important about it. Now, one note before we get started here. I don't know what the deal is with my voice. It seems to just not want to behave, and I don't know why. So you can hear the cracky already. I have no clue what it's going to do. I have tried being silent. I have tried tea. I have tried everything I can think of, and it just doesn't seem to make any difference. So I apologize for that. It bothers me, but it is what it is. And if I want to do the show, you gotta go with the flow. So I do apologize if there is coughing or crackiness, or I have to go for the water quite a bit. I will try to keep all that to a minimum, but I make no promises. So I apologize for that, but we got to do what we got to do. So anyway, I will persist despite my obstacles. I just made myself laugh. Anyway, let's start with the qualities that persistent people tend to have. I think that's a good place to start. If you're trying to become persistent, these are some qualities that you maybe need to adopt. If you are persistent, these are probably some qualities that you have. So let's start there. First things first. Persistent people are generally positive and optimistic. And this kind of makes sense. You have to be positive and optimistic to believe that you're going to succeed when you're facing an obstacle, or when it's a long path from where you want to go and where you are. Like, let's take basic one that a lot of people would identify with that requires persistence, which is weight loss. For the most part, if you are working on losing weight, it is persistence that will get you there. You have to eat properly. You have to exercise. You have to be persistent about that day after day. Now, I embarked on weight loss programs for years, and I was never positive about them. I hated every bit of it, and I was never optimistic that they were going to work, and they never did. And then when my heart decided to go completely wacky in 2008, it did take me some time, but I started figuring out, okay, here's what I need to do to make this work, and I need to do it regularly. And the upshot of all that, and I believed that it could work because I didn't make it draconian. I didn't get down on myself when I didn't do something. I gave myself a break in that, okay, I'm not going to go 100% out every day. But if I go 70%, that's way more than I was doing. And I'm still burning calories. I'm still doing what I should be doing. I didn't get flummoxed when I had a piece of cake or a bowl of ice cream. I figured, okay, I had my little cheat thing, and now I'll go back on the straight and narrow. And I kept operating that way. And I kept being persistent about it. I kept going back and trying, even when I felt like, gee, maybe I screwed that up, or I didn't do it right, or there was a problem, or whatever it was. So I was positive about the fact that I could do this, and I was optimistic about the outcome. The upshot of this is I've lost 75 pounds. And I have way more muscle. I have way more stamina. My heart health is better. I sleep better. I deal with stress better. There's been a slew of benefits that honestly I could not have predicted when I started this. I also have changed my focus, which I think is part of being persistent too. My focus used to be, because this is what I was told it should be, you need to be thin because thin is attractive. And that's what matters. And that was something I was kind of like, well, I'd been told for so long that I wasn't attractive that I didn't figure getting thin was going to make me more attractive. But when I switched the thought process to you need to lose weight because it will make you healthier. It will improve your heart function. It will let you sleep better. It will do all these things that you need it to do. Once I started looking at it like that, I became a lot more positive about why I was doing it. And I became a lot more optimistic that this was a goal I could accomplish. My looks are my looks. Whether I'm 75 pounds thinner or 75 pounds heavier, I'm going to look the same except slightly rounder or not. But my health can be really, really impacted by losing weight. So that was a way that I could kind of reframe the conversation to make it a more positive thing to be doing. It wasn't about how I looked. It wasn't about being a size 6. It wasn't about fitting in a little tiny dress. It was about being healthier. It was about having better blood pressure numbers and having better heart function numbers and being able to sleep better and being able to deal with stress. That stuff I could get behind. That was stuff I could be optimistic that I could accomplish. So that's the first thing that I think persistent people have. They're positive and they're optimistic. Second thing, and this is one I will freely admit, I put my hand up right now, I stink at this one. I do not have patience. I wish that I did. I wish that I was good at it. I'm not. But you do have to have patience because if you're being persistent, you're probably doing something that's hard and you're doing something that's going to take a long time. And you have to be patient and wait for it to happen. And I don't mean wait in the sense of don't do anything, but I mean wait in the sense of understanding that you will do things and they will perhaps not have the results you want, or the outcome that you're hoping for will still be really far away. But you have to be patient about it. And I'm really not good at that. I want instant responses. I want instant gratification. I want things to go the way I want them to go, and I'm not good at waiting. I never particularly have been, which is odd because you'd think I would be, but I'm not. So, patience is something that I need to learn. And I do think, honestly, patience also comes with optimism and being positive a little bit. If you believe that good outcomes are going to happen, you're a little more willing to be patient waiting for them, I think, than if you're feeling negative or you're feeling stressed or you're feeling worried or whatever it is, then you're probably not going to be as patient because you're concerned about the outcome. Or if it's the other option where patience may not work, is if it's something that you really, really need. Like if you're on a deadline for something, then patience can be harder because you know there's a finite end to this and you need to have whatever it is done by that point. So in those cases, patience is a little harder. Patience is, like I said, patience is not my best thing. I wish that it was. Um, I wish that I was better at it. It's something that I work on. And it's just not ever been something that I've been particularly great at. So there you go. But I think it is a good quality for people who are persistent. You have to be patient. You have to trust that the outcome you want will come if you do the things you're doing. And you have to just wait for it to happen. And you have to realize that you can't force it. And that's my thing sometimes, is that I want to force it to happen. I want to make all the pieces go where I want them to go. And the pieces don't always want to do that. So that's no fun, but it's kind of how it is. So another thing, another trait of persistent people, they keep going in spite of obstacles. This is one I had to learn. I tended to be a person who would encounter an obstacle and go, well, it's too hard. I'm not going to do it. It's not meant for me. I'm just not going to do it. And the thing is, we all have obstacles in our life, and it could be money. It could be fear. It could be ability. It could be opportunity. It could be access to something. It could be meeting the right people. It could be any number of things. And if you get stopped every time you hit an obstacle, you're never going to get anywhere. Because, the best things in life, or the things that are most worth it in life, are not always the easiest things. Now, yeah, sometimes it's great if something comes to you and it's really easy and you're like, wow, that wasn't hard at all. But at the same time, there's something to be said for the thing that you had to work for, the thing that you had to figure out how to get, the thing that didn't just drop in your lap. I mean, let's go back to the subject of my weight loss for a minute. I've lost, I couldn't even add it up. I've lost hundreds of pounds over the years. Some of it was forced. Some of it was because I was broke and starving, whatever you want to say. But none of that meant anything to me, and I quickly gained it back because I didn't work for it. This time when I lost the weight, 75 pounds so far, I have kept it off for, I think it's been almost 3 years now. So that's an accomplishment. And that's something that, yeah, there are days when my body hurts. There are days when I really want to eat a chocolate cake. There are days when I don't want to exercise. There are days when I'm sick or I'm tired or whatever it is. But I keep going anyway. I keep doing it anyway. I don't let the fact that, yeah, maybe I did eat half a chocolate cake or a sleeve of Thin Mint cookies. Not that I'm admitting to that, but I'm just saying it's possible. And when those things happen, you accept that they happen and you move on. That's how it works. And it's not always easy. And it's not always comfortable because sometimes the obstacles are big and sometimes it feels like you can't climb over them. And sometimes you get in the attitude of, why is there another obstacle in my path? Oh my God, haven't I gone over all these obstacles? Why do I keep getting more obstacles? Why don't other people get obstacles? How come everybody else's life looks so easy and mine is so hard? Now, we all realize that we don't know what's happening in somebody else's life. And just because things look easy for them doesn't mean they are. But at the same time, it's really easy to look at somebody else for whom things seem to be simple and think, why do I have all this stuff in my way and they have nothing? And if you let yourself fall in that mindset, then pretty soon the stuff in your way is going to derail you. So if you're persistent, you need to keep going despite the obstacles. You need to figure out how to get over them or around them or under them or blow them up or vaporize them or transport them out of the way, whatever metaphor you want to use, pick one. But you need to keep going despite them. That's what's important. Next quality of people who are persistent, they're resilient. You have to be resilient. Let's talk about resilience for a minute, because a lot of people think resilience is you get punched and you get back up, and you get punched and you get back up. I have a couple of little quotes or memes or whatever that basically say something to the effect of, if I never get told how strong I am again, I'll be very, very happy. Because I have been told so many times in my life, I can't believe you got through that, or wow, the story of your life and all this. It's like, you know what? Yeah, I'm resilient. Give me a medal. Whoopee. I would pay a lot to be slightly less resilient sometimes. But when it comes to persistence, that's a quality that served me well. I can take a beating and get back up. I can have something awful happen and get through it. I can encounter a huge obstacle and go, okay, I've been here before. I know I can make it through this. Now, is that always a comfortable thing, a comfortable weapon, so to speak, to have in your arsenal? No, because a lot of times resilience comes with experience of pain and sadness and hurt and anger and a whole bunch of other stuff. But at the same time, you have to develop that quality to keep going on the long journeys, to keep going towards the things that are big, to keep building something. Because if you can't take a hit and bounce back, if you can't absorb an obstacle or a setback or a failure and go, okay, that was yesterday, this is today, I'm going to start again, then you're not going to get to where you need to be. And resilience comes in a lot of forms. Resilience is, but I think at the core of all of them is really just the ability to deal with something that might be unpleasant or painful and go, all right, that was that. I've absorbed it, and now I'm going to move on and keep going. And resilience is, trust me, it's a skill that is sometimes really hard to build and is sometimes really hard to have, because if you've never gone through anything, you don't know how to be resilient necessarily. It would be nice to think, and I do in some sense think that resilience is kind of a human trait, that we all have it, but I think it's a muscle like anything else. And some people have never had to exercise that muscle, or haven't had to exercise it a lot. And some of us have spent a lot of time exercising it. And so it's something that you need to be aware of. And really, I think at its core, at its bottom, resilience is just the ability to absorb something that maybe is not great, that might be negative, that could be an impediment, and get back up and keep going. And keep going, not with resentment and not with anger and not with self-pity, but keep going in the sense that, okay, that thing was that thing, and now I am going to move on with a positive attitude, and I'm going to keep pushing toward what I want to do in the most positive spirit I can. It ain't easy always. It isn't easy. And keep in mind that resilience also should allow, I think, time to absorb whatever happened to you. If it's, if your business failed, if you ran out of money, if somebody stole your money, if, somebody was mean to you, whatever it is, take the time to absorb that, to heal from it, to understand it, and then move on. I think that's resilience. A lot of people mistake resilience for basically ignoring things, for just going, that didn't hurt. Like when you were 6 years old and you were on the playground and you fell over and you scraped your knee and you pop up and you go, that didn't hurt, and it did hurt and you knew it hurt, but you didn't want anybody else to know it hurt. Same deal. Sometimes resilience is about acknowledging the fact that, yeah, I took a blow. It hurt. It made me sad. It made me angry. But I'm going to feel those feelings. I'm going to deal with them. And then I'm going to move on. And Wendy said, I find my resilience ebbs and flows. Sometimes I'm great at trucking on. Other times it feels like I am walking through mud. And Wendy, I identify with that so much. I think everybody has that issue. There are times when you're more resilient, and there's times when it feels like you're almost Teflon and things just bounce off you. And there are other times when it's just like, if one more thing happens, I'm just going to lose every particle of composure I have. I totally get that. And I think that happens for most people. I think resilience can vary. And I think it has something to do with if you're dealing with any mental health issues. I deal with depression. If I'm in a depressive cycle, I'm a lot less resilient than I am when I'm not. If you've already had a lot of things hit you and then you get one more thing, that can do it. If you're in the middle of a really, really long journey of some kind, you're trying to get to a goal that seems really far away, there are times in the journey where you're just going to be, I don't have any more gas in the tank right now. I can't deal with this anymore. And your resilience is going to be a little lower. I don't think resilience is consistent. I think you're completely right about that. And I think we have to understand that and we have to accept it. But just because your resilience is low and you feel like you're slogging through mud, it doesn't mean that you can't still be resilient. It just means that you have to make allowances for where you are at that time. One of the things that I learned about exercise that I really had never thought about before, and I do a lot of routines on this platform called Daily Burn, and there's this guy that hosts the show they do every day, and he makes a lot of good points. And one of the points that he made is you don't have to go 100% every day. If the most you can put out is 50, do 50. If the most you can put out is 30, do 30. But do what you can do and don't beat yourself up because you can't do 100% every day. I think resilience is the same thing. If you can't jump off the mat and go, yeah, I'm fine, then sit on the mat for a while and rest. Or take a day or do whatever you need to do. And then get back up and move on. But don't beat yourself up because you can't jump up and be Teflon every day. I don't think that's realistic for anybody, honestly. There's a lot of things that are going to impact your resilience, like I said. So I think that's a really good point, and I'm really glad that you said that because I think that's important for people to realize that your resilience is not always going to be the same, and it doesn't really matter if you snap back immediately or if you snap back in a day or a week or a month or however long it takes you. It just matters that in the end you do it. That's what matters. So I like that comment a lot. Thank you for making it. I think it was a really good point. So those are some of the qualities: positivity and optimism, patience, keeping going in spite of obstacles, and being resilient that I think persistent people have. Now I want to talk about some ways to become persistent, or some ways, some tools that persistent people may use. Let's put it, either one of those will work, I think. And the first one is something that, oh, it seems like I've talked about so much, but have a goal and know your why. Know your why seems to be the root of almost everything these days. And honestly, I feel like it's starting to become a buzzword, and I don't love that. But I think it is important, especially when you're working on becoming persistent. Because if you don't know why you're doing something, and if you don't know where you're trying to get to, it's really hard to keep going on the days when it gets tough. If you don't know why it matters, if you don't know what the meaning of it is, it's really, really hard to keep going, especially when you encounter an obstacle. So, goals and knowing why you have those goals mean a lot. And I think they're also a way to help you be more resilient sometimes. If you know why you're doing something, if you do take a hit or if you do encounter an obstacle, you know why it matters to keep going. You know why this is important. And you also can figure out if maybe it's not as important to you, or maybe this isn't something you need to persist at. Because you'll hit a point where you go, this is something I really, really care about and I want to make happen. Or it could be, honestly, this is something that someone is paying me to do and I have to keep going. And maybe your why is, I like to pay my mortgage. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a valid reason. I think we invest the why sometimes with this mystical kind of quality of, the why is like this big holy grail thing. Sometimes the why is, I have 6 children and I need to feed them. Sometimes the why is, I like living indoors and not getting snowed on. And that's not wrong. Your why can be, and I think a lot of times people also think the why has to be altruistic. Sometimes your why can just be, this is something I want, or this is something that will be good for me. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And a lot of people tend to think if you want something for yourself, if you're doing something for yourself, if the goal is about improving your life, then it's selfish, that it should be altruistic, that it should be for someone else. And I don't think that's true. I think, if anything, you're probably going to be more persistent if you can see how accomplishing your goal is going to benefit you. That's my opinion. Other people may disagree with me, but for persistent people, I think knowing where you're trying to get to and knowing why you're trying to get there are two things that will help you stay persistent. And like I said, I feel like know your why has become, excuse me a minute, the buzzword of the last couple years at least. And I'm kind of tired of it and I'd like to come up with a new phrase, but I also think it's something that you do need to know if you want to be persistent. Why am I doing this? Why does it matter to me? Why do I care? What does it get me? What's the end result of this that I think is important? Why? Why am I doing it? Why does it matter? And once you know that, I think it fuels and informs being persistent. I really do. Because once you understand why you're doing what you're doing and why it matters, you're much more likely to keep going till you get to where you want to go. And having a goal is just basic, I think, because you have to know where you're trying to get to if you want to persist to get there. So, and we have a Facebook user here who says, I wish I knew who you were, but StreamYard's being annoying, who says, love that. It's easy to start feeling selfish, but that's not always the case. And I think that's one thing that I need to talk about more often sometimes, is that everything doesn't have to be for everybody else. It's okay to want things for yourself. It's okay to do things for yourself. And if your why is for yourself, that's not a bad thing. So, the next quality or the next thing that persistent people do is plan for obstacles. Sit down and think about what are the things that could get in my way here? What are the objections that I could encounter? When I started working on building the floor for Applique Getaway this year, that was one of the things I thought about. Okay, what could people tell me that would reasons they could give me that they can't do it? And which one of those am I just going to say, okay, I get that? And which one of those am I going to counter with? Well, here's this reason, and here's this thing we're doing, and this thing, and whatever. And I kind of came up with not canned speeches, but, oh, and apparently the person who commented is Moya. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. I'm sorry, but I like it. I'm going to say Moya because it just looks like Moya to me. Moya Boyd. And thank you for commenting. And planning for obstacles is basically figuring out what could be in your way and how you're going to bulldoze it if it is in your way. And it doesn't mean you have to sit down and have a 3-hour planning session. It means just 15 minutes of, okay, these are the things that could be problems, and here's what I'm going to do if I encounter them. And how this helps with persistence is when you do encounter one of these obstacles, you've already got a plan to deal with it. And you already are kind of in your head, you've worked out that this might happen. And so you're not blindsided by it, and you don't feel like, oh, I totally didn't expect that. And I think that's important because if you're planning for obstacles, if you are prepared when things happen, then you have a much better chance of overcoming the obstacles. And I also think it's a more realistic view. A lot of times people go into things and they think it's just going to be smooth sailing. Everything's going to be perfect. Everybody's going to want what you have. Everything's going to be marvelous. If you sit and think about it a little bit, how many times have you done something where there was never a problem? Where there was never an issue? Where where nothing ever went wrong? Where something never went wrong? I don't know. That doesn't even make any sense. Where nothing ever went wrong. It's probably pretty rare. I mean, even the best laid plans have glitches and issues. So have a plan for dealing with those and have a mindset that these things could happen. And if they do, I'm ready for them instead of everything's going to be great. And then something happens and, well, screw it, I'm done because things weren't smooth. Because smooth almost never happens. It would be nice if it did, but it almost never does, I gotta say. Next trait, don't be afraid of failure. Failure is, I think, a fear for a lot of us. Failure is something that we think is terminal. It's like if you fail, life is over, you're marked, you get a big scarlet F on your chest. Failure is just part of life. We all fail at different things at different times. We try something and it doesn't work. We ask somebody out and they say no. We interview for a job and we don't get it. We try to bake a cake and it falls in the middle and it's horrible. Or, any number of things. We're driving to somebody's house and we miss the turn we're supposed to take and we go miles out of our way. I'll put my hand up for that one. I do it all the time. And yes, even with GPS, I have done it because I don't listen to the GPS all the time because I'm in my head somewhere and I'm not paying attention, which is a digression. I understand, but I do it. So don't be afraid of failure. Accept that it's part of the experience. Accept that you can be persistent and you can try your best and you can overcome the obstacles and you still might not get what you want. And that's okay. The fact that you tried and you stayed the course is important because you're one of the people who did that, and a lot of people won't, either because they're afraid they're going to fail, or because they're sure they're going to fail, or because they think everybody will think they're awful if they fail. And that's another kind of myth that I want to dispel, which is the idea that everybody else is looking at you and watching what you do and judging you. They're not. I thought that for years. I thought everybody was watching everything I did and judging how I did it. And so I was scared to do anything. And then I realized that honestly, most people are too busy with their own fears and concerns and pains and angst and whatever. And they're not paying any attention to what I'm doing. They could give all the things I can think of to say are swear words. So they just couldn't care. They are not interested. They're preoccupied with their own stuff. So if you're worried about failing because you think other people are going to judge you for failing, they're not. Because honestly, they're not paying that much attention and they don't care that much. And the people that do judge you are not worth your time because they're judging you because they feel small and they want to make themselves feel big. So they judge people who are actually doing the stuff they're too scared to do. So I don't worry about those people. If they aren't willing to take the leap and do the hard stuff, then they don't get to tell me that I'm bad at it or that I failed at it or make any judgments at all about what I'm doing. And yes, people do judge other people. I'm not saying it never happens. It does. But there's a lot less of it happening than you probably think. And honestly, go ahead and judge. I've had people criticize my body, my words, my thoughts, how I act, what I do, who I am. And finally, I got to the place where I was just like, you know what? Go for it. Just go for it. Because I'm going to be me because I tried to be what everybody told me I should be. And I was terribly unhappy. And I wasn't good at it. I'm good at being this person. Now, if you don't like this person, if she's not to your taste, then okay. And if you want to tell me that, go for it. I'm not going to care, but you can tell me. And that's kind of, honestly, not even kind of, it is. It's the best place I've ever been in my life, honestly, because I don't care. Now, sure, I want to be liked. I want people to think well of me. I want, all the stuff that humans want. I'm not like, I'm as human as anyone else is. But I've also learned that it's not everyone is going to feel that way about me. And that's okay. They don't have to. So in a sense, I'm not afraid to fail to be human, I guess. I'm not afraid to fail at being the best me I can be, because even if I fail, I'm still way further than I ever have been before. So it's good. So don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to persist and not get the brass ring at the end. That's okay. You don't have to win every time. You just have to try. That's the message. Another thing you can do if you're looking to be more persistent, study people who are persistent. I read a ton of biographies. I like other people's stories, and I like learning about how other people did things. And they're not always famous people. I read a lot of historical biographies. I read a lot of biographies of scientists. I read pretty indiscriminately, and I just like biographies in general. But one of the things that I find from a lot of these stories that I read is that these people didn't get stuff handed to them for the most part. They had to persist. They had to work at it. They had to figure out ways to make what they wanted to have happen. And if you read enough of these stories and you pay attention, you start to see traits that kind of are consistent across all the stories. And maybe that's belief in yourself. Maybe that's exclusive focus on one goal. Maybe that's a really supportive family. Maybe that's not a really supportive family. Maybe that's an opportunity and being in the right place at the right time. There are things that are across all these stories that you can start looking at and going, okay, this is what persistent people do. This is what persistent people accomplish. This is how people become persistent. Yeah, you can take a class. Yeah, you can hang out with one of the gurus, whatever you want to do. Those things happen. But I'm just saying, in some way, and maybe it's watching videos, or maybe it's reading books, or maybe it's, going to museums, whatever it is, spend some time with some people who accomplish great things because they persisted. I mean, Lewis and Clark, I saw a documentary on them recently. 2.5 years, I think it was, at least 2 years and maybe 2.5, that they traveled across the US till they got to the Pacific Ocean. And it was not an easy thing. They had people who died, they got sick, they didn't have food, they had to go through all this stuff. They didn't know where they were going. They didn't know what was at the other end of the trail. They had no clue. They just were told, find out what's out there. And they went. And they persisted traveling. And they persisted exploring. And they persisted finding out about this place that nobody knew what it was. But it wasn't easy. And there were lots of obstacles. And for a while, people back on the East Coast thought they were dead. But they kept going because they had a belief that they could do it, and they had a goal and they had a mission. And they felt that their goal and their mission was worth it enough to endure the hardships they endured and to face the obstacles they face. So there's a lesson you can learn from their story. There's a lesson you can learn from their documentary. There's a lesson you can learn from reading about persistent people or watching documentaries about persistent people. And it could be someone you admire. It could be someone that you've never heard of. It doesn't really matter. I think the thing is, if it's somebody that's accomplished something that's noteworthy, read or watch or listen and try to figure out how they did it and what sustained them while they were trying to get to where they are. Because those are things that you can take on board for yourself and use to make yourself persistent. Next thing, stay away from negative influences. Oh, I cannot emphasize this one enough. And I used to be a negative influence. I will freely admit it. When I was in my early 20s, which granted was some time ago now, but still, I was the most negative person in the world. I was convinced that the universe had kicked me in the pants and I had gotten a really raw deal in a number of ways. And I was just angry about it. And I was pretty much convinced in any situation, the worst thing that could happen was the thing that was going to happen to me. I just knew it. And that was partly because life had pretty much taught me that. And it was partly because I was scared to believe that good things could happen because it was so disappointing when they didn't. But if you want to be persistent, you can't hang out with the people, including yourself and your brain, that tell you it's not going to happen, that tell you it's going to be too hard, that tell you that it's never going to work. You cannot hang out with those kind of thoughts. You cannot hang out with those kind of attitudes. You cannot hang out with those kind of people because you're derailed before you start. You have to believe that you can accomplish what you want to accomplish. You have to believe you can overcome the obstacles in your path. Excuse me. If you don't, you're not going to get anywhere. That's just life. That's just the reality of the situation. So don't be around negative influences. If you're hanging out with people who are always telling you you can't, or it won't happen, or you're not good enough, or there's something about you that's not going to allow this to happen, then you need to get away from those people. And I say that even if they're family. I have estranged myself from some of my family because of exactly that reason. Because I don't want to hear that I can't make it. And I don't want to hear that I'm not good enough. And I was told that so much when I was young, and I'm not listening to it anymore. So if you can't be supportive and positive, then I don't need you. And that's just the reality. And it's not always easy. Let's put it that way. Especially if you realize that you've been in a lifestyle that's been pretty negative, especially if you're trying to persist in overcoming something like an addiction. You may have to change a lot in your life, and you may have to get rid of a lot of negative influences, and you may really like some of those things, and you may really be comfortable with some of those things, but you're going to have to do it anyway. And I'm not going to say it's easy. It's not. But I will tell you this. The difference when you get those negative influences out of your life is huge. Because you can finally feel good about yourself. And you can finally feel positive about your life and the possibilities. And that is worth it. It is so, so worth it. So, negative influences. Last thing. And this is one that I threw in here because I've seen this happen. No good persistence from bad. There is persistence that is good, and that is when you are aiming toward a goal that you want to accomplish, and you're trying to do something positive. Bad persistence is when you keep pursuing something that you've been told should not happen, when you keep pursuing something that has a negative consequence, when you keep pursuing someone that you have been told is not interested in you. This is a thing that happens a lot with dating. Oh, well, she said no, ask her again. And I don't want to imply that men don't get this, but I think it happens more men toward women sometimes than women toward men, but I could be wrong about that. But persistence in dating, if you've been told no and someone's not interested and you keep contacting them and you keep getting in touch with them and you keep asking them out over and over again, that's not persistence, that's stalking. Don't do it. If you are trying to get a job and you've interviewed for the job and they've told you no and you keep contacting them and contacting them and contacting them, that's just being aggravating. At some point, you have to know when it's time to stop. And I did a show about this maybe a year ago called Quit It or Grit It, which is about how to know when to stop. And if you have any questions about when your persistence might be bad, go watch that show. It's on my YouTube channel. And it'll tell you all about it. But I wanted to touch on this point because I think there are times when persisting crosses the line from being persistence and becomes stalking or becomes a negative thing. And we need to be aware of that too. Because if you're persisting past the point where it's comfortable for someone else, if you're persisting past the point where there's any likelihood of success, then you've gone too far and you need to stop. And there's nothing wrong with realizing that this is just not the thing that's going to work. This is not the relationship that's going to work. This is not the job that's going to work. This is not the company that's going to work. This is not the product that's going to work. There's nothing wrong with that. I think it's more harmful to keep going when you have clear signs that you shouldn't. So that's something to think about. And my voice is starting to go again, and I've run out of things to say for today. So that's the show for today. Thank you, everybody that was here. Thank you for the comments. And I will see you next Wednesday. And bye, everybody.